Hello, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for being part of this afternoon's Wellbeing Economy Cymru online forum. It's been a little while since we've come together online, but really we're continuing the conversations that we were having back in November when we met in person at the Wellbeing Economy Cymru Festival of Ideas in Swansea. And we've run lots of these conversations and discussion forums over the last 3 or 4 years, bringing wellbeing economics to the forefront here in Wales and in partnership with a lot of really great organisations in Wales, really trying to challenge old business as usual economic paradigm and move towards a more enlightened view of what our economy should be for and the outcomes that we're seeking to deliver through economic activity and economic policy here in Wales. I'm Dawn Lyle. I'm just one of the volunteer coordinators and facilitators at Wellbeing Economy Cymru. We're a small group of impassioned citizens, really keen to do what we can to convene these discussions, to build a movement, to collaborate with others who are working to shift our economic system. And we have a really broad definition, a broad working definition of wellbeing economics. We think of it very much as an umbrella under which lots of great practice is sitting. And in the lead up to the Senedd elections in May, ourselves, as well as many other brilliant Welsh organisations, are hosting webinars and forums and discussions to urgently reframe our economic thinking here in Wales and think about what we're asking for from our candidates, our election candidates across all the parties here in Wales. What do we want from the next Welsh Government? What can policymakers do to strengthen wellbeing economics here in Wales? And what would we like to hear from candidates during the election? What would we like to see in the manifestos? And what are those policy levers that are available to us here in Wales to build the right kind of prosperity? So for today's session, that really is the question. We're looking at prosperity in terms of a shared, sustainable and locally rooted economy. And as we've discussed many times before, when we talk about the economy, we limit ourselves with an obsession on economic growth at any cost. And what we would love to see is more nuance and a greater awareness of who is that growth actually serving, who owns the productive parts of our economy, and do we have access as citizens to the means of our own well-being? So how is our economic system reinforcing inequalities or serving the well-being of people and planet and local places? There are things that the Welsh Government can do, and obviously we're working in a global context, and there are lots of things that we don't have power over. So it's really identifying what are the actions we can take at a government level, at a policy making level. And some of that is actually really about supporting practice at a local level. So it'll be interesting to explore today that balance between national level strategic policy making and on the ground actually working, actually happening community practice. And I think we've got a really great mix of speakers who will hopefully illuminate those different angles for us and give us some thought-provoking presentations to kick off the session to open up to some discussion. So our 3 speakers this afternoon, and thank you very much to these friends of Wellbeing Economy Cymru. We're really delighted that you're going to share your thoughts with us. We've got Dan Roberts, who is Senior Policy and Engagement Officer at Cwmpas. We've got Gwentley Evans, who spoke brilliantly on the stage in Swansea in November from Cwmni Bro Festiniog, and Catherine Howell, who is working at Banau Brycheiniog National Park and has been a great friend to Wellbeing Economy Cymru over the last couple of years. Really exciting to hear what's happening at the National Park and Catherine's perspective on how we build the right kind of prosperity and what that means. So we're going to hear from each of our 3 speakers in the order in which they're listed in the event promotion. which means we'll hear from Dan and then Gwentley and then Catherine. And after each of our speakers has presented, it may be appropriate to have a couple of reflections or questions. And so please have your questions or comments ready. And then once we've heard from all of our speakers, we'll open up to further discussion. So hopefully that will all run smoothly. So that's enough from me. And I'm going to hand straight over to you, Dan. Thank you very much for being here. So Cwmpas, as an agency that supports social enterprises and local economic strategy across Wales, would really love to hear your answer to that question. How can Wales build the right kind of prosperity that is shared, sustainable and locally rooted? Dan, thank you.
Thanks, Dawn. Yeah, diolch yn fawr iawn am y cyfle i fod yma heddiw. Thank you very much for the chance to be here today and for everyone wanting to be a part of this discussion. You know, it's such an important discussion. Um, you know, if we don't fix the way that our economy is structured here in Wales, we're not going to fix any of the challenges facing people in our communities. And having the space to be able to get together like this and have that strategic discussion about what needs to fundamentally change is so important and really you know appreciated and essential for for making sure we get the answers right you know at this crucial time with the election coming up. So what I'm going to talk about today basically is just give a bit of an introduction to Cwmpas, obviously, but then also the kind of wider ecosystem we have for cooperative and social enterprise development in Wales. Some of those definitions, which is always a fun discussion, but talking about what's the difference between a cooperative, a social enterprise, employee-owned business, and that type of thing. Then I'll talk a quick little bit about the evidence base we have in Wales because we are fortunate to have a strong evidence base, both qualitative and quantitative, and case studies and things like that. And also then onto those policy recommendations about what does this look like in practice if the next Welsh Government really did put these ideas at the heart of an economic development strategy and wider strategy, a wider programme for government, what would that look like? So yeah, first of all, to introduce Cwmpas, I'm sure lots of people on the call have hopefully either engaged with Cwmpas before, or either getting some of that specialist support that we offer, talking to us about policy, engaging us about and talking with us about what Wales could look like in the future. But we're an organisation that's been around for a long time in Wales. We were started in the 1980s by the trade union movement in the South Wales mining communities at that time of deindustrialisation, when workers got together and thought, what can we do here to be proactive to make sure that the jobs that we need in these communities are maintained for the future. And it's that spirit has been and has stayed up with Cwmpas for the decades since, basically, and now we've expanded into a wide organisation employing around 100 people all across Wales, working on different ways and different sectors and different opportunities for us to embed those values of cooperation, social enterprise, in our economies and in our communities. Our mission now, we're actually in the process, or about to begin a process of putting together a new strategy. But our mission at the moment is to empower communities across Wales to shape a better future for all, putting people and planet first. And then there are three key goals within that. So number one, creating a fairer, greener economy. And we do that by providing that specialist business support for people looking to start those social businesses, whether that's a cooperative, community-owned business or employee-owned business. And developing these models within our economy for the good that they create as the gold standard of businesses. Number two, then building a more equal society. So we do that through promoting digital inclusion, supporting people to develop community-led housing solutions, preventative care services, cooperative care models, that kind of thing, which has such an essential impact to allow people to engage in their communities and in the economy. And finally, driving positive change. So that's having learning development programs, supporting the growth of these sectors, developing leadership, supporting people to look into social value, digital transformation, and that kind of thing. So that's a really wide spanning type of work that Cwmpas does. My role within that is looking specifically at policy and engagement. So making sure that the policy environment in Wales is as strong as possible for people to be able to do the type of things that we want to do. So obviously it's a really crucial time at the moment. I think we heard recently that the first manifesto is going to come out next week for the Senedd elections. What we've been trying to do over the past few months and years really is making sure that these models are both understood by the political parties, because there's going to be such drastic change at the moment. I don't think we can assume anything at this point. Um, Making sure that political parties of all persuasions see the value of this work and also have, clear evidence-based strategies for actually implementing the change that we need to see to make sure that these sectors and models can grow in the future. Uh, so I mentioned Cwmpas. I just wanted to talk a bit briefly as well about the social enterprise stakeholder group that we have in Wales. So 5 organisations that provide support to the social business sector in Wales in some way have come together to work together strategically. So that's Cwmpas, WCVA, Social Firms Wales, DTA Wales, and Unlimited. They all came together before 2020 to, like I said, be strategic, to cooperate, and not duplicate services, but to make sure that what we're offering is the most beneficial as possible to the sector. And then in 2020, we published a 10-year vision and action plan, and that has the specific goal of making social enterprise the business model of choice in Wales by 2030. We've got a long way to go to get there, and if we're going to achieve that vision, we need everyone, on this call today, but and much wider than that, to come together to put these models at the heart of what they're doing and think about what they can do in their role to grow this sector and to maximize the impact of the sector. Um, but the fact we have that, I think I think it's a really important asset, and really important that people know that. This sector isn't an idea. It's not a new idea. It's already existing in Wales. Just this morning, I was at a Moss Rose Cottage in Cardiff, the east of Cardiff, which provides incredible services for carers and young people in Wales to come together to have a space that's theirs. And I always say, as a policy person, sometimes you can have your head in reports all the time, and you can talk about kind of an academic interpretation of why these models are so good and the value they create and everything. Nothing's better than actually going and utilizing the service that they provide, or seeing what it means to the people that they're providing a service for. Um, what we do have in Wales as well is a really strong evidence base, like I mentioned. Can I get the
You okay there, Dan?
It's also frozen for me, Dawn.
No, I
might
think
have
he's
lost him.
actually, yeah, I think he's actually dropped off
Was I
the.
kicked out then? Sorry, I'm back now.
Oh, you're back. Hi, yeah, we lost
Sorry
you
about
for a
that.
moment.
Did I get to the social business mapping report?
You were just about to start talking about the evidence base, yeah.
Yeah, great. So yeah, the social business mapping report gives us that really strong evidence base, about the scale of the sector, the impact it's creating, attitudes within it, barriers in it as well. And it's really important. So we know at the moment that we have over 3,000 social businesses operating in Wales, and that's up 13% from 2022. So the sector employs between 57 and 68,000 people, and on top of that, there are around 60,000 volunteers too. And in terms of the turnover, this includes quite big organisations like Welsh Water, which is not for profit, and housing associations and things like that. But if you take all those models into account, the turnover within the sector in Wales is between, it's around what we say is between 3.5 and 5.7 billion turnover annually, anchoring wealth, that wealth and that turnover in Welsh communities. And I think that's really important to acknowledge because, like I said, this isn't a new idea. This isn't something that, that academics or policy people have come up with in some room somewhere to say, if we change the way that we deliver services or develop businesses, we can create lots of good. This is already happening. There are already people out there in communities doing this. And what we want from the government and policymakers isn't to come up with a brand new idea, but it's about supporting this sector that's already creating so much value. So that social business report, like I said, it encompasses lots of different models. So just a quick understanding of the three models that I kind of see. So you've got social enterprise, cooperatives, and employee-owned businesses. And it comes down to either, what is done with profit or how that business is owned. So for a cooperative, for example, that's a member-led business. It's owned by the members, and it can have different types of members. It can be a worker-owned business or a worker-owned cooperative, where the workers within that business own the cooperative, and and decisions are made democratically, and the profit that's made or the wealth that's generated is distributed between those members. It could also be a community-owned business, a community-owned cooperative where members of the community are members of that cooperative. Or it could be a producer cooperative like we see in the farming sector, quite successfully. There are lots of different models for that, but the key thing is that democratic value that's embedded within the business. We also have employee-owned businesses, and that's a sector I'll discuss later on, but that's grown considerably in Wales at the moment. That's where a business is owned by an employee-owned trust on behalf of the employees. Doesn't necessarily have that democratic element within it, but it does ensure that the profits generated are, equally distributed and that the business is anchored within the local area. And then we also have social enterprise, which doesn't necessarily have democratic ownership, but does have that lock on the profits that are made to ensure that any money that's made doesn't go to external shareholders, either is reinvested in the business or the cause, the service that they're delivering or working towards. And in that social business mapping report, all of those models come together, and we can see the scale of the sector already. And like I said, not only does it talk about the kind of quantitative understanding of the sector and the scale of it and everything, we can also see what people are talking about, the barriers, what's stopping them from growing their social enterprise, or when they were starting their social enterprise, what's the biggest barrier that they faced. Also the strengths as well. And actually one thing that came out of the last mapping report was the really high levels of optimism within the sector, which, given the challenging economic conditions, isn't something we can take for granted. But what really came through strongly is that people who run social enterprises have lots of ideas about other stuff that they can do, which maybe isn't surprising given the key role that they have in their communities. They can see the challenges that are there, and they have solutions. They have that entrepreneurial mindset to identify solutions, and actually make them happen. Given that evidence base, we were in a really strong position to put together the Social Enterprise Manifesto, which had 6 key asks of the next Welsh Government, to make sure that the policies that are being developed and being implemented are actually based on the evidence that we have about the sector. So, first of all, and surprisingly, one thing that we've come across really strongly is around the need for that specialist support. This is the first time we asked a specific question about the value of that specialist support, and over 80% said that it was, really important to them that they had that specialist support. I was at, like I said, I was at a social enterprise this morning who was talking about the advisor that they had support from Social Business Wales. My colleague Reese, they were saying that they wanted to put a poster up on the wall of Reese and have a statue of him in the back garden because he was such a massive asset to them. This really inspiring woman who had this idea for a social enterprise, had never started a business before, didn't know what a community interest company was, but knew that she had something. She had an idea to create a lot of social value. She could go to Social Business Wales and speak to someone who knew exactly what the model was, what needed to be done, the rules they needed to follow, how they could amplify what they were doing and speak to the right people and everything. And that's such an important, and having that distinct specialist support service really came through strongly as being really important. Then another thing that unsurprisingly comes through really strongly is the need to have accessible and appropriate funding. A lot of the financial services at the moment don't have that understanding of these models, and that's something that has to change. And the government can play a really key role in both offering those financial, funding opportunities where possible, but also proactively working with other anchor institutions and financial organizations to develop their understanding of these models and why they are organizations that can be invested in. Something that we lost after the loss of EU funding was market development capacity within Cwmpas, and I think that's essential for the growth of the sector as well. At the moment, we can offer a responsive service. If people have an idea, they can come to us. We can help them develop that idea. The capacity that we've lost, we can still have some of it, but the capacity that we've lost is that opportunity to proactively identify opportunities in communities or in sectors educating people about these models and the impact they can have. And we need that additional investment capacity, specifically around cooperatives, I would say, where there's a huge opportunity in Wales. If we can get that together, that's something that can make a huge change after the elections. Number four, there's so much more I wanted to say, but I'm going to need to hurry up. Four, community wealth building is a framework that puts all of us together. Embedding those principles is going to be absolutely key. Community ownership we've been waiting far too long for community ownership legislation. We were already behind Scotland. England have overtaken us and then gone even further more recently as well. We need to have community ownership rights embedded in legislation in Wales. We don't need to have any more commissions about it. We don't need to talk about it anymore. We just need, as a priority in the first year of the next government, to have community ownership rights embedded in legislation, and there to be a package of support around that to support communities to do it. Finally, we need to make sure that when people are learning about entrepreneurship and enterprise in schools, social entrepreneurs, cooperative communities and everything are embedded within that education. If we educate people about Elon Musk as an example of an entrepreneur, it's going to put 1 million people off. It might inspire some people. A lot of what we found is that they don't think Wales is the place to become an entrepreneur like that. They think they have to go to London or another place with lots of skyscrapers and money and everything else. If we educate people about entrepreneurship in this genuine way that we have in Welsh communities, whether that's our local small business owners or cooperatives, social enterprise, that's what's going to make people want to become entrepreneurs in Wales. We have lots more that we talk about this. We have a Cwmpas manifesto on top of this social enterprise manifesto where we talk about lots more models, but I'll just talk about that manifesto for now. We're really keen to have conversations with people about this because we're passionate about the impact that it can have and want to make sure that the evidence we have are leading that discussion. We have our Cwmpas conference coming up next week on March the 4th, where we've got Neil McInroy as the keynote speaker. He is the legend of community wealth building, and he's going to be talking about how we can implement those models in Wales as well, which should be it should be an amazing day with policymakers, academics, practitioners too. But yeah, thank you very much for the opportunity today. I think just to finish off, we're going back, like I was talking earlier about why Cwmpas was started. It was started by those miners in those deindustrialized communities. We've got another transition coming up. They tried to embed cooperatives in that transition, and I think we all know that it wasn't done in a just way because it wasn't community led. We're going through another transition now. We can't repeat the same mistakes, and it's discussions like this and evidence like this that we have that can make sure that Wales doesn't make the same mistakes again and can transform our economy to be one where people can thrive here. So yeah, diolch yn fawr iawn am y cyfle I siarad efo chi gyd heddiw. Thank you very much for the chance to speak with you and looking forward to any questions.
Thank you, Dan. Thanks for kicking us off there. And I think the first thing you were talking about really was about what are the different ways in which we can empower communities and really strengthening social business models, awareness and support for that is all about empowering communities to address challenges themselves using those different economic models that you've described there. If anyone would like to reflect on what we've heard from Dan, please do raise your hand and come in, not for a question as such, but any reflections at this stage are welcome. I heard Dan saying that it's about anchoring wealth in Welsh communities. So what are we doing with profit and how are businesses owned? And so as you'd expect from an organisation that was established to support cooperatives and to explore that as a model, the answers are in those more democratic and egalitarian business models. And it's great to hear that there is such a strength within that sector and a need for continued support. Philip, I'd love to hear your reflections. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, Dawn. So this is an observation from a number of different meetings because I was at the Bevan Commission meeting on the future of healthcare. Yeah, for a very small nation, we don't often not talk to each other about things that are going on, and there's lots that good stuff that's going on in Wales. Okay, so one of the things that we're lacking, without being political about it, is decisive leadership and reform with a small r, not a big R. And we have suffered decades of being at the bottom of the table in absolutely every measurement of economic development and growth, right, and have done nothing for our deprived communities and not changed their lifetime trajectory or opportunities at all. So what I would call for is a much more holistic, consistent, and integrated model between the public sector, and by that I mean health, social care, education, local authority, yeah, and industries who want to develop a proper portfolio around a fairer, greener, and more prosperous Wales, okay, on a regional basis. And quite frankly, our old thinking for the last X number of decades hasn't got us there. So it's time for radical reform with a small r, not rehashed old thinking, because that's not got us anywhere. So I would be up for how do we change the lifetime trajectory of a 10-year-old in our most deprived communities and be able to monitor and prove that they've actually done something. Going back to Dan's conversation about evidence base, that's a proper evidence base. How do we change somebody's life who would have had not the opportunities if we hadn't done what we've done? That's where we need to get to. And if we don't get to that, then basically we're just having a rhetorical discussion and not changing anything, or the deck chairs around the Titanic. And I wouldn't be up for that. I don't think we should invest our time in rearranging deck chairs.
Absolutely. Thank you, Philip. And James, any reflections from you?
I have a question, actually, Dawn. You talk about profits leaving Wales. Has any of this documented? Have we got some numbers on it?
I haven't got numbers to hand in front of me. That is something that we should look at, isn't it? The profit leaving Wales. Yeah, what's your thought?
Well, it would be nice to have that number because it gives us a target for saying we want, what percentage of that we don't want to leave, doesn't it?
Okay, good. So what I'm hearing from you there is make it real with numbers so that we can set some hard targets for stopping profit
I think
leaving.
just to come in on that as well, one really interesting and important context is that Scotland has just passed its specific legislation on community wealth building and are making clear that that's a start and not an end point. But one thing that they need to do within that is that public bodies need to have specific strategies on how they're going to contribute to community wealth building, and that, alongside ensuring that people have strategies to take that approach to economic development, would mean gathering that data and looking at how much profit is being lost at the moment from Welsh communities. So I think, yeah, that's essential. Having that evidence is key, and then having a strategy to make sure that we can then pass and keep that wealth that's generated in Wales within Welsh communities is the next step.
Dawn, there is a Welsh diaspora report called Brain Drain to Brain Gain that's been given to Welsh Government with all the economic migration that's happened over the last 10 to 15 years, going back to James's question about what do the numbers look like on how much innovation we're losing and why we're losing it. So that report is publicly available. If you ask, there's a copy of it that can be distributed to people. It's quite insightful why major entrepreneurs who did their innovation development in Wales but had to leave, why they left, and why potentially they might want to come back.
Thank you for signposting that, Philip. We'll look that up. Brain Drain to Brain Gain report. Thank you. And Barry, love to hear from you, and then we'll move on to our next speaker. Thanks.
Thank you. I'd like to just make a few comments about what Dan and Philip have just stated, and that is, I'm an industrial psychologist, so I do work, organizational psychologist. I've been working with a organization here in Powys for the last 6 years, and we've been trying our best. The organization's been trying for 12 years to work with Powys Teaching Health Board and Powys Community Council to basically change. We're involved in, I guess we would call a paradigm shift, pretty much what Philip had indicated, where there's a need to take a much closer look as to what has worked and what hasn't worked. So my career, 50 years now, working with organizations to do just that, is since I live here in Wales now, I'm very involved with that process. And like to point out that a study I was involved with recently with PAVO, the Powys Association of Voluntary Organizations. It hasn't published the report yet, but soon they're going to be coming out with a major report that involved looking at these various issues, the ones that we've discussed today. And the conclusions, since I wrote the report, I know what the conclusions are. Essentially, all the conclusions support everything everybody has said today. That everything seems to be moving toward the answer of community-based or systems, as opposed to government-based systems or corporation-based systems. So I think we're moving in that direction, hopefully so, but we do not currently have the political will to do so. So the upcoming elections are going to be, I'm not sure what, like everybody else, I'm not sure what's going to happen, but I think what we need to do is put greater pressure on the Welsh government and local authorities to take this seriously, to take communities seriously. The results that I just looked at, it was, like I said, a major study, very clearly states that the communities are in Wales are asking for a different way to do things, to make this a better country by involving people and generating wealth for the community by doing various things, as we know. I won't go into there's a laundry list of things that need to be addressed. So I'm going to stop here because I'm on my platform now, but just like to point out that what I'm hearing today is very much in support of, I think, what's actually happening, and the research supports this.
Thank you. Yes, and that leads us really nicely into our next speaker, Barry. So as you've said there, what's happening in communities in Wales is exciting and dynamic, and communities looking for ways to empower themselves in the absence of anyone else coming to save them. And Cwmni Bro Festiniog is a fantastic example of a community, Blaenau Festiniog, that was on the receiving end of bad economics for many, many years, and then passionate, determined local people are turning that story around, and it's inspiring. And Gwentley Evans is here to tell us a little bit more about it. So thanks, Gwentley. Really looking forward to hearing what you guys are up to and what you would like to see from the Welsh Government to empower others to follow in your footsteps, and indeed to empower the work that you guys are doing locally. So over to you. Thanks for being here, Gwentley.
Diolch Dawn, diolch pawb. Yes, I'm going to share screen now, and this is, where everything gets unstuck, isn't it? Hold on. Yeah, I'm really sorry. If I don't have a PowerPoint, then I will just moither on. So I'm going to do it through PowerPoint, and it'll hopefully keep me on point.
Great, that's just loading for us now. I think that will work.
Okay, can you see that?
We can, yes, perfect.
Yeah. Okay, so if you can see here now, this is Blaenau Festiniog. It is a town, a post-industrial town in North Wales. If you haven't been, then you should. Pick a nice day. Yeah. So in terms of where we are, as I say, we're a post-industrial town. Was a town of 15,000, taken down to 5,000 now in Blaenau Festiniog and the surrounding villages. It is an urban-rural area, or like Sal used to say, it's a rurban area. So that urban-rural area, which is away from a lot of amenities. Success was always told to us that is leaving. You have to leave to go to college. So as soon as you need to make something of yourself post 16, you are told that success is to leave. So this is how we're trying to change that tide, this idea of that the responsibility and the talent that we have is available to us, that we do have what we need in our communities. It's in our own hands. So what we are is we are a social enterprise which has 20 social enterprises as a part of a network. We are the highest density per head per capita in the UK, I think, from last what I saw. So all the social enterprises work together. They're all independent. but they decide to work together, and it's based on trust and collaboration. So it was that discussion of how do we actually show that we do create money, that we are an economic force as a network. So we can see here annual turnover is 4 million plus. Our staff within the social enterprises in Blaenau Ffestiniog is 94 for full-time, 65 part-time. So that is quite a significant employer. Volunteers is 180. All our social enterprises consist of board members. So we have 70 board members. That's a lot of skills. That's a lot of people giving their time, and isn't that an amazing thing? So we're now creating a network where they can come together and peer-to-peer support each other as well. And then the value of assets is 6 million. And isn't that's the where you want to be, that you have more assets that are retained in the community for the community. What we do see in Blaenau is people are able to buy assets in Blaenau because it's quite cheap or low price, and then they sit on them and they don't do anything. So in terms of us, we try to buy assets and create it for the community, and keep it for the community. So these are our aims as Cwmni Bro Ffestiniog, so promoting the collaboration between enterprises, creating those opportunities, support and growth of enterprises, increase community participation so that voice comes through all the work, initiates the support of new initiatives. So that the idea is it's one of those where it's not rocket science, and isn't that the radical thing, is that it's based on trust. If you get rid of that competition and have good conversations, then good things can happen. And yeah, that's the really how this works. Because if you had 20 social enterprises and they were all competing with each other, it wouldn't be for the benefit of the community in the end. So this is basically how we work. We give opportunities to have a discussion every 6 weeks. So they come together, they have a chat, they see what's happening, but also decide on what the training opportunities are and what they would like to work on, or if there's a way to go for funding together rather than individually. I'm just going to zoom through these because I can't really see everybody. So I'm just going to zoom through. Yeah, so we do hold meetings for community assets and having those conversations, but also discussing with Welsh Government, getting those initiatives and stakeholders to be a part of these conversations, because we can't do this all by ourselves. The importance is knowing who's best placed to do what, but that we're a part of the community, where the community is part of that conversation. So we do feed into Welsh Government strategies on what assets, community assets transfers could be, how that could be shaped better, but also we make sure that the community is part of those conversations. Oh, it's frozen now. Okay. So this is just a case study of one social enterprise here. So this is Antur Stiniog. Antur Stiniog was set up out of Communities First, that was around Wales. It really worked here in Blaenau Ffestiniog. I'm sorry, do you have, Lucia's got a hand up, but I'll leave till the end, yeah?
Yeah, keep going, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So yeah, so this is a social enterprises that started out of Communities First. At 2010, we realised that outside agencies were holding parts of North Wales and offering adventure tourism. So Kerry is better at saying this because he was there, where you had a group of young people went out, and they were, we're not the best behaved, but we are fun. So at 2010, they recognised that this is something that's extractive. The money was going outside of Wales. So how do you create something that's adventure tourism that stays and retains and circulates in Blaenau. So they started with a downhill bike centre. So it's you pay to get up to the top of the hill, you bike down, and they take you back up again, and you get to do that all day. So they started with this. Following on from that, you had the Tourist Information Centre went on sale, and they thought, well, we could buy that. So they actually bought they got a loan for this instead of having a grant, so it wasn't grant dependent. That's now a cafe where it's an amazing asset where community goes in there, but also you get to go as a visitor to Blaenau and be a part of the community. It's getting to see Uncle Day and asking when's the bus, and Uncle Day will answer, well, it'll be in half an hour. So that's Caffi Antur. So following on from that, because they were a social enterprise that could look after assets, they were given an asset transfer of 9 of the buildings on the high street. So that's where we work here, and Dref Werdd, and also Antur Stiniog have an office here. But all of a sudden, that portfolio started to grow. They followed on by buying the first hardware shop in, well, this is contested because it went into the paper saying that the first hardware shop that was a social enterprise was somewhere in England. Well, we just haven't put it to the press because, we're shy of retiring. So Avion Stores is one of those shops where you go in for a bulb and you come out with a bowl, a peeler, a brush, all those sorts of stuff. But also it became something that was obviously a really good model of a shop, a retail space, but also somewhere to live above for a family. So they started moving on with that model a lot more. They bought the next door to us, which is now a fuse space. It's a salon and it's a space to live above. And we bought the Aelwyd. The Aelwyd was an old building, and there was nothing wrong with it. It did exactly what it needed to do. The community had a discussion. They said, keep it as it is, but make it warm. So this is now a youth space which has 120 children going to it every week. And here, these buildings, they are absolutely stunning buildings. It doesn't do this justice in this picture. At the point of this picture, yes, there wasn't a roof on one of the buildings, but they're on our high street. It's a really long high street, and it's not going to be the same. So how can we have spaces that reimagine what that look like? And that'll be Bolton Cafe and Ephraim, where you have a retail space, you'll have workshops below, because what you have in Blaenau is a lot of people that are sole traders, so they can have a space underneath, but also that there's somewhere to live in these higher floors. Sorry, words and trying to say things quickly. So it's that holistic approach as well, because we can't just do one thing. All of our social enterprises stand in the gaps in a lot of the services that have left Blaenau. So what we do have is we have Dref Werdd, Wyrddni, and we've got Seren as well, that look at the environmental side of this. So food growing, it's looking after biodiversity in our area, because there's no point in having community enterprises if we don't have the environment. That they have to go together. So we hold evenings with the children so that they have a youth committee which say what they want to see, but also that we have a maker space. That sort of that idea that it has to live in the area. We have a well-being approach. So this is, again, looks after the staff, but also it looks after the volunteers. So this is a programme that asks the staff what they think. And it was overwhelming how much the staff in the network actually love their jobs. They do it because they love it. And that they're passionate about the difference that they're making, and that's where you want to be for well-being. And then the other things, we can work on that. So we now have we're developing sort of discount cards that allow people to circulate the funding through, or money through, our town, but also those well-being days, Pilates days, going out for walks. During this walk, we had a foraging day, but also drumming in the middle of a valley, which was fantastic and bonkers. So it's that having fun and creative, because unless we're doing that, then yeah, we don't see the point. It's what actually speaks to our community. But also this comes with getting the social enterprises boards to discuss with each other as well. But also looking at how all our social enterprises are best placed to be able to signpost to each other, rather than think that they have to do everything, but that somebody is doing something and that they can signpost. So we're creating our own strategy, because what we found was a lot of the strategies weren't working for what we were doing. So right, we'll write our own. So that's in progress at the moment. Yeah, changing the narrative. So we are the hotspots. We are the first ones we call. Oh, do you know anybody that's poor? It's a deprived area. I want to get a T-shirt with deprived on it. It's one of the things that we fight against, that we're not deprived. We're very rich in a lot of different ways. Yes, it isn't conventionally rich, but yeah, in a lot of different ways, Blaenau Ffestiniog is. So how do we change that narrative? Well, we do events, we get the community together, we create videos to show what's on offer. So raising that pride, becoming a vibrant community. So we have Broadcast Ffestiniog, which is a platform where we have performances, but also we have videos. So we've got short videos, 200 showing what's available in Blaenau Ffestiniog. They're all Welsh language with subtitles as well, so that people can use it as a resource to learn language. We advocate for our work. We advocate for community work, because it's not. I think it's changing now, but it has been a while, and community, that tanker is turning, but it has been a while to get down to there. But it's discussing what happens, the importance that we do have as community enterprises in the economic world. And it's that, isn't it? That sort of the status quo isn't working. Our communities are working for economy, but the economy isn't working for our communities. So we need to flip that. So this is what I was discussing. We can't do everything on our own. So one of the big programs that we're working on at the moment is so in Tangrisha. I won't go back to the first slide, but in Tangrisha, what you have is two big neighbours as businesses, but the actual village is suffering from fuel poverty. So we're getting everybody around the table to have a discussion about what a community energy service would look like, developing that, and this is making sure that everybody's around the table that needs to be around the table. So working with stakeholders, not working against them. Yeah, what does prosperity look like? I think that collaboration is really important, that it's environmentally sustainable, because yeah, like I was saying, there's no point in having our communities unless we have the environment for it. That this is it's rooted in our local communities, that the voices of the communities coming through all our work, that the circular and foundational economy, not the circular in terms of not in recycling, but that when you work in your community, you spend local. So that is the retention of the pound, and that we're culturally resilient. And I think that a lot of our areas, especially Blaenau, I think we are underestimated. I think that sometimes our community underestimates themselves and the talent that they have and the entrepreneurship that is available here. It's in our history, in our heritage to be able to do that. But it's that when you're bored in the shade, you strive for the sun. So yes, I'm happy to say that it's a resilient town. It's because it has to be, but this is the idea of how we work together in order to have that prosperity. I'm going to stop.
Thank you. Thanks, Gwentley. It's a great example of where there's enough strength that's been developed through all your work over many years in the town, so that you have enough critical mass to continue to influence the right decision making, to take on more assets, to turn those assets into valuable resources for the community, to have that strength in numbers in terms of the workforce and the volunteer force, to be providing fulfilling work to people that feels purposeful. And whilst lots of those examples that you shared, we can see those happening across communities in Wales. What we see in Blaenau is the critical mass, the network, the collaboration. And I think you made a really important point there when we're putting social enterprises up in competition with each other for pots of funding, and that mindset of competition from the kind of market economy spilling over into social enterprises. It's really counterproductive. And so that sense of collaboration is clearly really strong. And you talked about the importance of asset transfer, and we can see in the figures that you shared the capital assets that the community now controls, which offers some real long-term resilience for the future and opportunity for so much great stuff to happen. So thank you for sharing the story, sharing those examples. We've got a few hands up, and so we'll take some reflections. Lucia, let's come to you. Thanks for your patience.
Oh, thank you. That was absolutely wonderful. So inspiring. It reminds me of my song, Will You Weave Me a Basket? I don't know if you've heard it before. It's one I've sung on some of the Wellbeing Economy events. But it's the skill and the care there. And, you know, that whole idea of bringing the whole community together. So my question was going to be, what was the like top 3 magic ingredients that you could highlight? For example, did you have some super elected members, MS and councillors that really drove this forward day and night? Or were they just ordinary community members who wanted to see change?
I think it's community members. I think that we have the support of our politicians locally as well, which is really important. But I think each community is completely unique, but you do need to find those catalysts or be able to inspire that. And I think it's learning from being open with mistakes as well, not just showing the shiny. And I think that makes the difference.
Thank you.
Thank you. Philip, would you like to come in with a reflection?
Yeah, thanks, Dawn. This is the problem about where we're at the moment, okay? So if we had a descriptor of economic prosperity that linked to the United Nations 17 SDGs, yeah, the Blaenau-Ffestinian model would rate really highly in there and would be rewarded accordingly. Because we don't, yeah, it actually totally undermines the way economically that people are going to look at what's happening in Blaenau-Ffestiniog, because it doesn't value the community entrepreneurship that's been demonstrated, and because we still run everything according to GDP and GVA, right? Now, currently, there is no commitment from anyone in Welsh Government to change the way that we describe economic prosperity, and that's the problem that we're running into right at the front, okay? If we don't change what we mean by a prosperous Wales, yeah, things like Blaenau Ffestiniog are always going to be ripped apart by certain communities and certain economists, okay? Because it doesn't demonstrate services or products that are commercially viable for the community because it's probably heavily subsidized to begin with, okay? But that's not the point. The point is we do not have a national sovereign framework for well-being like New Zealand does, where initiatives like this get properly recognised and rewarded for the value that they're providing for the community, because everything is in GDP or GVA, okay? And this doesn't look good on GDP or GVA, right? So that's why it needs a radical approach, because the centre doesn't even accept that this is a good way of looking at economic prosperity.
Yeah, good point, well made. We talk a lot in Wellbeing Economy Cymru about what we measure and how we measure success and what we value. So I think that commitment to change the way we describe economic prosperity. And for me, that's also, yes, GDP, GVA, but also just moving away from an obsession with...
Sorry, Don. Can I make one further comment, and then I've got to go. It's been a fantastic conversation. Love to be involved in it. Okay, right. So this is the real point that I think people need to discuss. Okay, what's the only FT 100 Welsh company in the FT 100?
You tell me.
Right?
Sorry, say that again.
Admiral Insurance, right? Why should Admiral Insurance be more valued than what's happening in Blaenau Ffestiniog? Because it is, and it will continue to be until Welsh Government change what they're defining in terms of a prosperous Wales, okay? And it's it doesn't matter how much we talk about social value, community value, circular economy. So circular economy is just not waste recycling. It's looking at the opportunity lifetime-wise for people locally to expand their skills and to be able to contribute to the economy of the community, okay? Until we change that framework and Welsh Government accepts it, post-election, okay, we're always going to struggle to try and get this in the headlights of the politicians, because that's not what they're measured against, and we need that's where the radicalism and what Barry suggested needs to come into. If you're going to do this properly, you need a total sea change in the way that we think about economic prosperity, okay? If not, the really great work that's actually been done for local communities will largely get ignored because they'll always favour Admiral over Blaenau Ffestiniog.
Yeah, agree fully. I'm sure others in the room really agree with that as well. Tom, I'll come to you. Oh, and then I'll come to Gwentley. Did you want to respond quickly to that?
I've just popped a couple of the research papers that we're working with Furl on in Blaenau Ffestiniog and Bethesda. So those are very GDP driven and actually having a negative effect on our community. So I've just popped those into the chat. So those are really interesting research papers.
Yeah, some great research that's gone on with your work, comparing the impacts of big global tourism operators versus that sort of locally rooted model and the bang for your buck in terms of that investment. So yeah, thanks for linking to those reports. Tom, what would you like to say?
Diolch, Dawn. Diolch, Gwentley, as well. Yeah, I wanted to agree with a lot of what Phil said, really. There's something about clout, isn't there? That's a word that Sel used to use sometimes. And heartening that you've got Baroness Senedd and other politicians around you there. And the more people in this room and the more that movement grows, the more influence you have over those guys. Because at the same time, we've got a new weapons deal, 50 million to encourage the growth, pursue GDP and GVA by creating more weapons factories in South Wales. So there's an imperative, isn't there, to do it quickly, I think, at the same time. I wanted to ask you about Zip World, and that's because, yeah, I live in Hirwaun, so at the front garden I can see the Ricos Mountain, which is where the Tower Colliery buyout happened. I don't know if anybody's aware of that, where the workers bought out the pit themselves, and ran it as a workers' cooperative. And now it's a Zip World with quite a substantial public subsidy, again, chasing growth, chasing this GDP. So I guess it comes back to maybe James's question about numbers. Is that something you guys have looked at? I know Zip World are quite prominent, shall we say, in your part of the world, and how that works financially.
Yeah, we have. Those are what's in the research papers. It's definitely worth taking a look there. They are getting a significant Ambition North Wales pot of funding. It's not going to it's not going to be massively detrimental to the community, but the fact is that it's 85% 0-hour wages. So it's contracts that aren't working for the community. The average, I think you'll see on the paper, is £13,200 a year for their workers. It isn't going to cover basic income needs, and that's all on a contract that wouldn't work. I think for summer holiday jobs, it's good wages. For anything more than that, it's actually going to increase that feeling of to succeed, you have to leave. That's the issue that we have. I think that we did have a conversation with them around what an endowment fund could look like, and I think that wouldn't have been massively out of it wasn't really a huge ask. It works similar to what we see in different companies, if they're wind factories or wind farms. It's possible. So, but they weren't going for that, and they looked for a different community benefit rather than that. Yeah, it's a difficult one because the economic strategic plan, it doesn't work for places like Blaenau Ffestiniog. It works for places where you can have a big industry park, but the big industry parks aren't working for Wales. They're not. They can bring a lot of growth really quickly, but they can be taken away once that investment's finished. So I think that we need to reimagine what a good Wales strategy looks like.
Thank you. And let's hear from Barry, and then we'll move on to our final speaker.
I'll try to keep this short, Dawn. I'd like to echo pretty much what was just said, as well as what Philip, he's no longer here, but what he said earlier about the importance of the social value of things here in Wales. If we don't place greater emphasis on that, I agree with Philip that the country will plod along. 20 years from now, we'll be talking about the same things. So we need to refocus and spend a lot more effort on emphasizing the social value of things in Wales. In particular, I'd just like to mention the study I mentioned earlier. We found that people do want to stay in Wales, at least in Powys. And the issue about the migration out of Wales is a very great concern. So the two things going for us in Wales is a very deep sense of community. That's what we found. And the other thing we found is people want to stay for its environmental beauty. So those are true assets, if you want to call them that, and have to be looked at from a social perspective. So again, less emphasis on the economic value, more on the social value.
Thank you, Barry. Yeah, that reinforces a lot of what we've heard. And, how do we really tell the story about the value, the greater value that is delivered with this model of anchoring wealth within Welsh communities? Right, we'll move on to our final speaker and hopefully allow a bit of time for a few minutes of further discussion. I'm really delighted that we've got Catherine Howell with us. Catherine has been tasked with looking at natural capital within the Bannau Brycheiniog National Park, but we've asked a broader question: how can Wales build long-term prosperity that's shared, sustainable and locally rooted? So over to you, Catherine. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this.
Thank you so much, Dawn, and to the team at We Cymru for the invite today. It's both like a little bit scary and interesting to go last, right? Because I think the conversation today has been absolutely fascinating, and I think, happy to kind of like respond to some of that debate as well. As Dawn said, my role is as head of natural capital developments at Bannau Brycheiniog National Park Authority. I'm one of the returners to Wales. So I moved back to Wales a year ago, having spent all my adult working life away in London and internationally working the likes of the UN, the Red Cross, and others in, how to achieve and finance like these big sustainable development goals. And I was so keen to come home and think about what change means in my community, in where I love to be, and thankful that Banau Brycheiniog employed me into this role. I'd be very happy to like come back another day to like talk about the specifics of my job. It really relates to like how do we fund nature recovery? How do we fund these big transitions around like water and climate change? So happy to kind of talk about that another time. But yeah, the exam question was really like to focus on like the role of then this kind of locally rooted enterprise. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about, I think what, to be honest, like everyone on this call like acknowledges, right, is like, why are we here? And I want to also present to you like some of the great work that's going on. I do believe in, what has come before us in terms of the discussion today, that we need this kind of change at a political level. But, having studied, gone back and done my master's in like transition theory, we also need to, as communities, kind of be that change, right? Like show governments that this is possible and show it through doing. And I know that that's not easy, but I think that's where, personally my heart is at the moment, and working with communities in and around Banau to do that. My focus of the presentation is also not like exacting on what do Banau do, but in terms of a national park authority, just to kind of cover that out really quickly, we are a statutory public authority, of course. We have planning powers. We ensure rights of way and access to the beautiful landscape that we are also now charged with looking at, not just protecting, but restoring, with communities at the heart of it. So as I say, I'm really thrilled to be part of the team that's working on that. It starts here with an acknowledgement, though, doesn't it, from our side that the state of nature and societal prosperity, are dire, aren't they? We at Banau, if anybody's seen our management plan, I'd encourage you to have a look at it. We took Kate Raworth's donor economics model and modeled where we are as a national park. And I think this type of exercise that you could do in any place across any scale, Donor Economics Action Lab offers great tools to do that. Can kind of show you, the state of where you are and the state of where you want to go, both from an ecological ceiling. We see here we're breaking many of our limits around climate, biodiversity loss, water quality, and our social foundations. As we've been talking about today, communities that we live in and around get called deprived. There's so much richness of cultural heritage, but basic needs aren't being met in many places, and we have one of the highest child poverty rates in Wales, and it's really shocking. And we know that these dual challenges around the ecological nature crisis, the social crisis that we face, are a direct consequence of the economic model that has been pursued for decades. And so, that's how we come to this topic of wellbeing economics. And for Banau, we set out, so I say I stand on the shoulders of absolute giants who did this plan prior to me joining the park. But the plan then sets out a kind of vision that the park become a place of inspiration and really driving action and a vibrant, sustainable future. And we do that by enabling, like creating an enabling environment is probably the best way to describe it. As I said, happy to come back and talk about the details of that, but we are not going to be some of the examples shown today, but we want to enable those examples to thrive. And we do that through having really big missions around net zero and climate, around restoring, catchment and river health, around nature recovery. And as you see, these big missions on the right-hand side, they're all nested, and they're nested because everything happens with communities, being enabled to kind of take the lead, and come from a place, as was described earlier, the unique situations that communities face, even across Banau, they will be different depending on where you go. So everything is sort of nested in the uniqueness of each community. And Banai is a living and working landscape. You might come and walk the hills, the beautiful hills around the waterfall country, but the reality is it mirrors a lot of the land use in Wales, which is agricultural use. 90% of land in Wales is agricultural land. And so we're working not just with wider community, but also with, one of our big communities is the farming community. And that then takes us into different systems, and we think a lot in systems change in our work. We work in the food system as a good example, sustainable tourism, transport, etc. So that's a little bit about us and what we are kind of reaching for in terms of our big goals. I had said, I want to talk a bit about the positive work that's going on, and somebody mentioned in the chat that Rob Hopkins's book is so inspiring, and I joined a talk that he did in Talgarth a couple of months ago, and his recent book I would really recommend, because the whole thesis of Rob's work is that these sort of like wide-ranging and large-scale rapid transformation that we need, we come back to those big goals, like where is it going to come? It feels so overwhelming. We call on the political class to change. And I think his thesis is trying to tell us that like this already exists. There are things that are happening, as we've seen today, with the support that Cwmpas bring, with examples around Wales. And we need to take actions as citizens, taking to John Alexander's work and a nod to that. And I think that can then demonstrate to the wider kind of, policy, political change that's sort of needed, because what we're doing is using practice to inform the policymakers on what needs to change, what needs to enable these changes to enable a thriving of different social businesses across Wales. So it's sort of informed policymaking from the grassroots up, which I definitely think policymaking can do a lot more with. So I'm going to run really quickly, and these slides are available to you through some examples of what we see around our community, around Banai, our wider work with Powys, which is one of the big local authorities covering our area, and then, happy to talk about any of these examples. But, as an example, in the education space, Black Mountains College is now a good few years old. They're doing incredible work on, training the people and the younger people, and whatever age you can go back to college. I went back to college at 40. To really build the kind of skills of the future. They're based in Talgarth, so do check them out. Our food trust, formerly Buoy 1200, are, again, really doing fascinating work in understanding how we grow the amount of fruit and vegetables and horticulture in Wales. But not just that, but we do it in a way that is more democratic in terms of who owns land, who can farm land, how can it be attached to also the housing crisis. So, our food trusts do some really fascinating work and also anchor their work out of, again, very scary spaces, right? Food security in Britain is a really challenging topic, one in which the nature and climate crisis is bearing down upon. The Pen Pont project is just one which we absolutely love in Banai. They are an estate, the Pen Pont estate in the Brecon Beacons, and have worked with a group called Action for Conservation to really imagine how that estate could look in 100 years' time. And I think what this work reminds me of is that we didn't arrive at today in the last couple of years. We arrived here over, 50, 80 years of various changes in the system. And what this work does is say, well, let's project forward. How do we want the land to be used, worked, owned, etc.? And do that with a really wide cohort of people, and then unfold that future together. And so that's a really fascinating project on kind of land use and who has a say in how land is being used. At the heart of a lot of our work is farmer collaboration and farmer innovation, and the Beacons Water Group, along with Welsh Water, are really at the forefront of some of that in and around particularly the Usk catchment. Boyd Powys Foods is another good example in the food sector. From Powys, again, we have community-owned electric car sharing services that have spun up. So again, thinking about, these multiple sectors that need transitioning, there are multiple examples out there. There's a waste not in Newtown. I know in the Futures Gen report, I think there was a recent recommendation that, every town should now be having a kind of similar waste not hub, and how public bodies like BANI and other local authorities can help support their development and their thriving. An example here in community renewables, and I'm not going to go into some of these, but Community Energy Wales have done incredible work and have recommendations for the new incoming Welsh Government. The Hive is another great example of, again, a kind of coming together around a circular economy or library of things, but it's anchored in the community. So what happens in the Hive is reflective of the kind of community needs and wants. There's also, I think, the discussion here on when we talk about business, but I think there's an element of the kind of community organizing that's been talked about. And, in response to the increasing flood risk that we're seeing, we see flood groups coming together and really using that kind of volunteer aspect of work to come together in response to the flood risks that are coming. So I'm going to just skip through some of these because otherwise I'll be here all day, and I'm recognizing the time. As part of my my master's, I actually did some work in trying to understand. I think the question earlier was what do some of these organizations have in common, or what are those secret ingredients? And I think they are so locally rooted. It's hard to completely distinguish them, but just to offer you two things that I found in kind of academic literature and actually were talked about earlier. Hinton did some really amazing work on understanding what a kind of post-growth enterprise, what the characteristics of it. And as mentioned earlier, right, relationship to profit is at the base of all of this. And then how businesses are incorporated, their governance and strategy structures kind of, build off that. But at the base of this is how we think about profit and who gains from it. And then another, academic framework that was elaborated on Hinton's work, again, really interesting for anyone who's an academic nerd as well, like me, thinking about, what does it take then? Not necessarily to scale up, because I think the scale up is a very GDP paradigm, but scale across. How do you have a Cwmni Bwrdd in other places? Because it's not a copy and paste. So how do you kind of scale across? And part of the work of these organizations, as we've seen today, not just their regional embeddedness, but they become change agents. They influence others to develop enterprises in a similar vein. And we see that quite strongly when you look at the literature and evidence. Here are my thoughts on what else is needed, and I'm not going to go into all of the details because we've already talked about a lot of them. We've talked about political will. I don't think Wales is short of ideas or people with huge amount of passion for, what, kind of more regenerative practice looks like. And you only have to look to these reports, the IWA, Futures Gen, Community Energy Wales, to find a whole set of recommendations on what government could or should be doing. And some of these have already been talked about today, right, in terms of, the work of Cwmpas, non-financial support to new alternative businesses. And I'd say as well, the support to businesses that want to transition to ESOPs or employee-owned companies, is just as important as the support to new business startups as well. And this is my baby. This is where I work, regenerative finance. And, to finish with, my absolute Shira herself, Kate Raworth, a business that is built on a living purpose may have strong foundations, but without a source of finance that is aligned with its values, it's unlikely to survive and thrive. So yeah, really thinking about what is the role of the financial system in bringing the right kind of resources to bear on this change, and happy to leave it there because I could talk all day on these questions. So back to you, Dawn. Thank you.
Thank you, so much, Catherine. And as you've offered there, we'd love to have you come back and talk a bit more about natural capital and how to finance that sort of regenerative work that you've mentioned there. But really insightful to draw out what those examples that you've shared have in common. And there are some strong themes coming through across all three of our presentations and the discussion today. And welcome any hands up. If you haven't shared your thoughts, please start putting your hands up to come in and reflect on what Catherine has shared and generally the discussion today. I think that point about finance being aligned with the values of the work that we want to do is really, really important. And Gwentley mentioned the idea of endowment funds or community wealth funds. And maybe that's something we need to see is much more serious thinking about what power Welsh Gov has to require more financing of community initiatives when big businesses are making profit in Wales, and how that might look. There definitely needs to be some progress on that. And I also appreciated the point you made about scale, and that it's very much in that old GDP paradigm to think everything needs to be bigger. And actually some of the stuff that really works really well and is locally rooted is not huge scale. It's a myriad of small initiatives. And I think that's very difficult for investors or for governments to kind of get their head around, that it's okay if something isn't huge, but that we need to spread those sort of smaller activities rather than always thinking that we need bigger projects and bigger investments. And I think that's a real barrier, particularly when you're looking for finance. People want the big ticket items and they want to know what are the big single things that the Welsh Gov could invest in that would make all the difference. And it's probably not as simple as that. It's actually the big thing is to invest in the small things. To invest big money in small things across Wales would be just transformational. So I'm just talking here because of the threads that I've pulled out of the discussions, but I welcome anyone to come in. The community ownership piece and the right to buy is a really important part of this. So what can Welsh Gov do to enshrine the right of communities to have first refusal when assets come up for sale, or have a 6-month period to get their crowdfunding together and to get the investment in place to acquire assets, whether that's land or buildings? That sort of support with asset transfer that Gwentley mentioned. And the other thing I've written down is about local democracy. So we sort of started talking about empowering communities as being really key to economic strategy. And what that means is empowering those structures within communities for different stakeholders to come together and discuss what's needed and listen to each other and figure out what strengths we have and talk about difficult subjects, but stay in the room and keep talking. So empowering those kind of structures for local places to make decisions together feels to me there must be some policy levers that could support that way of working, and underpinned by somebody being brave enough to say that we need to move away from GDP and GVA and jobs growth as a measure of success, and align our measurement and our understanding of what we mean by prosperity with those wider values. So a commitment to changing the way we describe prosperity, we describe success, being prepared to just call out business as usual. I think it must be really difficult when you're faced with, as for example, the First Minister has set herself a challenge of attracting inward investment. You know, who is going to be brave enough to move away from that old paradigm of trying to attract extractive business models into Wales and instead say, actually, that's business as usual, that isn't working for Wales, that will never work for Wales, and we need a new definition of success. I've made loads of notes, and I think it's trying to pull these things into actual policy asks and recommendations. That's the challenge on all of us. So welcome anyone else's thoughts. Lucia, can I come to you for some thoughts?
Yes, just to applaud what you've just said there. Thank you so much. That just gives me more power to my elbow as an independent candidate for the Senedd who's going to be brave enough and bold enough to say that. Try the prosperous way down to low or zero carbon living. Let's get this right. And I think hopefully the broadcast on the 7th of April will help us get closer to people, because they'll start to realise that this is not a nice to do, it's a need to do. Yes. Thank you.
Oh, thank you for that. I think we've got quite a few in the room today who are standing in the upcoming Senedd elections. So hopefully today's discussion has reinforced some of the good thinking that you're already doing about how we can do something different, how we can offer something different and really impact on some of those painful figures around child poverty, around the life prospects of people growing up in Wales. How can we really make a difference? Over to my colleague Margot. I'd love to hear from you, Margot.
Because of what she's just said, that there are several candidates in the room, could we ask them what they think Wellbeing Economy Cymru can most effectively do in the next couple of months? You know, we're planning another 3 of these forums, but those are quite small numbers. Everyone has said people want to meet together. Other people have said there need to be conversations. Is there anything that this organization can do to help the candidates? Do you want us to be at hustings meetings asking questions? Is there some list of 3 asks or something that would help? I'd love to hear.
Okay, yeah, grateful for thoughts on that. And I have actually shared Margot's email in the chat in case anyone would like to feed back. But yes, Lucia, let's hear from you.
Oh, yeah, it would be absolutely fabulous if you could come locally into my constituency, Pennybont, Ganog. We have a venue here, the Gathering Place, right in St Athan, which is the former MOD community. So there's all that rebuilding. We've got a lot, it's going to be a really tough challenge to help people make the shift towards what you might call a more prosperous and more eco-socialist candidate. Yeah, well, I'm not more prosperous, but you know what I'm trying to say. So yeah, I need all the help I can get to drive home the messages about wellbeing economy, because I think to use terminology like welfare, not warfare, is not changing people's mindsets. So I need more of that innovation that you guys have come up with the fantastic menu of projects and ideas and the thinking and the and the well thought out programs that you've got there. So if we could have, I did invite you last year to the One World Wales event that I was hosting. So if I know time's not on our side, but if we can get a date between now and the 7th of May, I will meet with your diary and I will clear mine to have you come to our community. I don't know if you have pop-up stands. You must have from the conference, yes, that people can see that this is a very real force for Wales and for families and communities, and and to change that narrative that we've heard about today, that it moves from the economic to the social. But we all know that it's the wellbeing economy that kind of almost, I think, masters the art. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you.
So, it's not about that, we can't start to do everything for nothing, but on the other hand, we've got to tap into all that capital, social capital that people are just desperately needing a little impetus and initiative and to feel safe to have a go.
Thank you for that. Yes.
Great. Okay, so will you liaise with me, Dawn, if that's a do, if that's a goer, as they say?
Let's keep in touch and look at dates. That sounds good.
Thank you.
Thank you. And it really is core to what we're trying to do, and not on our own, but with a network of amazing organisations, some of whom we've heard from today, is to raise the visibility of wellbeing economics as a viable framework for thinking about economic development and what we want for the future of Wales. we're really well placed here in Wales to lead the way. There is great stuff happening, but it does need some of these real foundational policy levers in place to strengthen the great work that is happening on the ground and really create the environment for more of that to happen. So raising the visibility of wellbeing economics as a really useful framework, and we just love to see much more use of that term and embrace of those principles at a national level and in the corridors of power. Yeah, interesting times for Wales, and really interesting discussion. We could probably keep talking. I am aware that we've come to the end of our hour and a half together, and hopefully colleagues on the line feel like that has been a useful and inspiring discussion. I think part of the thing for all of us working in this space is that we need these opportunities to feel inspired and empowered and feel not so much that we're swimming against the tide, but feel like we're riding a wave of change. We all need to somehow feel that and find the energy to keep fighting. Sometimes I feel like we probably blame the Welsh Government for the global economic system, and it's figuring out how we can create a prosperous Wales despite the direction of travel so frightening to witness across the world, and to really lean into those positive examples, not just here, but across the world of change happening, new ways of thinking, new economic thinking. But we've somehow got to make it real, because the energy is there, the enthusiasm is there, that commitment, and Lucia mentioned that social capital, those different forms of capital, whether it's natural, human, those different forms of capital. We're wealthy here in Wales when you look at some of those different ways of measuring wealth, and we need to just make that real in a policy framework and empower all of that good stuff. So for me, it's been a really interesting lunchtime. Thank you all so much for joining us. As Margot mentioned, we're trying to schedule a few more of these between now and the election, so you're all on our mailing list. We'll keep you posted. Huge thank you to Dan, to Gwentley, and to Catherine for sparking such interesting discussion today. Keep in touch with us, share your ideas, your feedback, and your thoughts for these forums, and we'll keep bringing us together, and hopefully between us all we can create the change that we want to see. All right, thank you very much. So much.
Bravo, thank
Bye
you.
for now.